Welcome to 1 Minute to Midnight. I'm Wilfred Cunningham. This week, established Republicans came out against Donald Trump. Refugees continued to leave Syria for Europe, and the fear of Zika and the virus itself continued to spread. Of course, there are other things going on. 151 of the countries on Earth were listed by the Global Peace Index as being at war or in armed conflict at the end of 2014. There are stories out there so insignificant even on regional levels, they make nothing but the local press. Stories filled to the brim with human emotion and suffering, so earnest and terrible they can instigate nothing but woe. Tales of atrocities so despicable you wouldn't believe them. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Donald Trump, because his rise could have global consequences. After all, he could be the next president of the United States. Mitt Romney, endorsed by Trump during his own run as the Republican nominee, came out and cut Trump down as the party seemed to rally against, not for, their frontrunner.
If Donald Trump's plans were ever implemented, the country would sink into prolonged recession. His domestic policies would lead to recession. His foreign policies would make America and the world less safe. He has neither the temperament nor the judgment to be president, and his personal qualities would mean that America would cease to be a shining city on a hill.
There are, of course, many ideas as to why the Republican Party are trying to remove Trump. Not all of them are, of course. Chris Christie, who may or may not regret his actions, has backed Trump. A huge amount of voters seem enamored with him. Is it because he's seen as an outsider? Trump has never held office, and he certainly has backed Democrats in the past, but he has backed Republicans too, is part of the American business establishment, and has been well known to mix in political circles for some time. His policies and their alienation of swathes of demographics might be a better reason. But perhaps it could be argued he has alienated people who would never vote Republican anyway. So what is the reason then? Maybe the reaction from veteran party members isn't to do with jealousy or fears of being unable to control him. Surely there must be worries about how to steer any president, especially one who has come from outside of the party. And yes, there may be legitimate reasons for fearing Trump that stem from suspicion of his motives. But what if the real reason the party wants rid of him isn't to do with control, him being an outsider, being too powerful, or not really being a Republican? What if the real reason is the party doesn't think Trump capable of real politic? Too ideological, too unreasonable, in their eyes. The policy of deporting 11 million illegal immigrants has been decried on all sides as being impractical. If you believe those voices, there isn't an economic justification. What about the wall? That may deter economic migrants from Latin America, but the cocaine and heroin comes in on ships and private planes. Or maybe it is practical. Maybe it's a sign of strength. Trump's economic plan to put an additional $10 trillion on the US debt has also been called impractical. His ideas on foreign relations, unpragmatic. Maybe he lacks realpolitik. Maybe he does not. It doesn't change the fact that he is very popular and appears to be the frontrunner. So that must beg the question, are the veterans in the GOP who are desperately trying to destabilize Trump standing in the way of democracy? I will try and talk more about the refugee crisis in Europe in more depth at a later date. Every day there are new figures showing how many are dead, displaced, and simply missing in Syria and the borders of its neighbours. For now, a new truce seems to be sticking, but with dozens of factions operating under often unclear alliances, agreements, and with their own agendas, it might be difficult to say that widespread fighting will be over soon. Syria has been somewhat replaced in the news by the situation's very direct effect on Europe. Boats and roads of people making their way to Greece, Italy, Germany, and other countries seem to supersede reports of the fighting, although that news still prevails. Could it be that Europe is more concerned with the economic and political implications of mass migration than a bloody and multi-sided regional war? But that's not to say the exodus and sudden influx of people from one place to another is not resoundingly important. The surge of refugees has long-term consequences for Europe and the rest of the world. In mid-2015, experts were saying that it would take a generation to rebuild Syria. Now, the region seems to be destabilised for the long haul. Those people and their children will long be assimilated into Europe before they can return to the Middle East. Finally, Zika. A brief mention here before the situation develops further. Zika is a virus that is carried by mosquitoes and can be transmitted in other ways, including sexually. There is very strong evidence to suggest it can cause microcephaly, with a huge surge of cases in Brazil. Zika is a problem. The world has many problems. Perhaps Zika is more tangible than other threats and ongoing wars, proxy wars, and diseases. Some might predict that the fearful headlines continue, and will continue sporadically, fulfilling their own agenda, just as they did with the Ebola outbreak in Western Africa. Others might say that Zika threatens to greatly burden the next generation. There are at least 11 epidemics in the world right now: HIV, coronaviruses, dengue fever, cholera, but all are seemingly under control, at least for now. So until next time, goodbye, and try to remain calm.